Hello, everybody, and welcome today. I am David Jones, Gilardi, Developer Relations Engineer. I am joined by Misbah Syed.
That's
Syed.
right. Yeah. So yeah.
I got it right
So
first time.
hey everyone.
How many times am I going to say this? Yeah, Misbah, and we're gonna dig into using local models with Ollama and Langflow. Misbah, you want to give a little primer, kind
Oh
of
yeah,
spice everything
sure.
up for everybody?
Yeah, no, thanks, David. So yeah, my name is Misbah Syed, and yeah, I mean we've been doing some of these last couple of weeks. So this one is going to be on open source models and running them locally. So we're going to use Ollama, and we'll talk about how that works. But yeah, just maybe a quick overview is that we'll start with a basic workflow that we usually do, just that makes sure things are running fine. And from there, build a local RAG app where you can ask questions to PDFs or other documents entirely locally. So that's nice. No data leaves your computer. And then from there, we go on to the next step, which is we'll build an agent flow, which uses Crew AI integration that came out last week. And with that, we'll have a look at just three different examples, and it's a build along session actually. If you can follow along, then I'll try to give it some pauses in there so you can follow along. So David, yeah, that's how the session is going to look like today.
Awesome. That sounds great. And this one's particularly fun for me because I myself have not actually used Ollama. I've used all sorts of local models before, right? But I haven't done it with this, so I'm super curious to see kind of like what you're going to show and all that. First question though, we do a little housekeeping and stuff like that, and then I'm going to bring up a poll. Actually, that's the question I was referring to. So if you were to take everybody, if you take a look at the right-hand side of your screen in Crowdcast here, you should see a little toolbar. You'll notice that there's the chat that folks are already speaking in. There's a Q&A section. So if you do have questions, right, put them in the Q&A. Let people upvote them and stuff, and then we'll use that to kind of get to questions as we go. But the first thing I want to do here before we get into the content is find out. You should see a poll now that shows up. Have you previously joined one of our live streams before? Let's see. Oh, we got some new folks. We got at least one person who came back. Hello, whoever that is. Welcome back.
Oh wow, look at that! A lot of new folks actually.
That's cool.
Nice.
And if you're seeing the polls, then that's the same area, by the way. That little toolbar over there is the same place you're going to go for like the Q&A and everything. So again, if you have questions or whatever, please ask them over there. Okay, looks like the majority of folks are brand new. So hello to the new folks, and thank you for those folks who've come back. And I do see didn't have sound the first time. But with that, can you all hear us? If people are responding, I'm assuming that we have sound, but let us know. And by the way, I will go ahead and say this in the messages as well. But at any point during the stream, if you notice that your screen, the share looks fuzzy, the resolution is great, refresh the browser. Crowdcast does that sometimes, so just refresh. All right, looks like we're all good. With that, Misbah, what do you think? Let's get into some content and start working with Ollama.
Yeah, let's make it happen. Awesome. So yeah, I'm gonna share my screen real quick and talk through the example. But also, again, if you happen to have two screens that you can follow along, feel free to. I'll try to keep the pace a bit slow so you can follow along and also build together. So, David, quick check. Can you see my screen?
I can see your screen. It looks crystal clear. Again, if for some reason Misbah's screen looks a little blurry or anything, just refresh the tab. That usually clears it up.
Perfect. Awesome. So, yeah, we're going to start with open source models and how to run them locally. A great talk that I would refer everyone to is this an hour video by Andre Karpati. He has been prominent in the field, and there are tons of good content from him. This one starts off with the basics of what is a large language model. So I really like that. It's non-technical, just talks, about like, okay, how different things come together. And the key thing over here that I want to point out is any of these large language models, what are those at the core of it, right? So what's happening is there are these companies, organizations, individuals, they're training these large language models using text, a huge amount of text from the around the internet. Okay, there are different data sets they use, and the goal over there is they want these AI models to basically predict what's going to come next. So just prediction-based models. So there's a little more to it, of course, right? But high level, you want a certain model to say, if I want to generate a blog test, what text, so what's going to be the text like? Or if I want to write about certain thing, so what's going to be the prediction of that, right? So it starts with the next word prediction and goes on to predicting whatever we see right now with ChatGPT or Claude or so, where it's able to do so many amazing tasks for us, right? So that's where, so you take certain data set in here, so it could be text, it could be more than that, train these models, and now what we get out of that is a file which has the training weights. So now the model knows that if a certain thing comes here, then the next word or next sentence is going to be in a certain way, and all of that is done with this training, and this training file usually is quite large. So you'll see that there are multiple versions of these models where you can basically download the training weight. So the file, that's the larger file, and then there's another file which is the configuration, saying that, okay, how do I run this model, right? And this configuration file is probably going to be a little different for different way you run it. So in this particular example, there is a file written in C that Andre is talking about, and then again, if you watch through the video, he gives more explanation there. Now, from there on to Ollama, which is today's discussion, right? What did they do? So what they did is they made it easy for us to download these weights as well as configuration. And we don't have to worry about running all of this and worry about what operating system and all of that. They have it all together, similar to what Docker did before, right? You have a containerized version of an application. So you can say Docker run certain tool or program or so, regardless of what server, what operating system, whatever you're using, it just runs easily with all the available. I mean, given that it was configured properly in the Docker file itself, then it should run fine, right? So same thing with Ollama. Now it made it easy where you can just say Ollama run certain file or certain model, right? So in this case, we can say Ollama run Llama 3.1, which came out, which was announced yesterday, and then again, different models as well. And the way you start with this is now we can actually start the follow along or build session. First step is, if you have never used this before, I would suggest go to ollama.com, and on here, this is the home screen. You can download the version of Ollama which is compatible with your operating system. In this case, I downloaded the Mac OS version. And once you do that, it's going to bring one of those files which you can install like any other executable file. You run it, and once you do that, then you'll see, in my case, for a Mac user, I see a small icon on top saying, okay, this Ollama is running. Okay, so now at this point, your Ollama installation succeeded, and then you have this running on your computer. It might take a few seconds. So in case if you have any questions, or if you feel any, if you get an issue, let me know. We can look into that, or maybe towards the end also we can debug. So first step, you have Ollama installed, and then you have that running. Okay. Now, how do you go from there on to actually running a model? It's quite simple, actually. So I'm gonna go back to the main page. So for example, there is about Llama 3.1. It says once I click that, I see some information here. Now, again, this is a sort of model card for it, where it talks about the model itself, what sort of parameters, quantization. So again, this is a little more info. If you have some information about these models, then definitely I would suggest for you to go into each of these models, look through some information and details. If not, then at a high level, you have different variations, right? So in here, you see there are 3 different models available: 8B, 70B, and 405B, right? So these are the parameters available. So 8 billion, 70 billion or so. And then for the one that they made it easy for us to run on most of the machines, so something like mine, which is just a laptop, I don't have a GPU attached to it or so.
I was going to
So
ask
in
about
this
that
case,
actually. Yeah.
yeah. So I think, yeah, David, you asked earlier about this, right? So this just makes it easy, where you go with the default version, which is 4.7 gig file altogether, and you just run it as you would run a Docker command, right? So you probably have seen Docker run certain containers or image. So that's what basically you're doing here. You just run Llama 3.1. And where do you run this? Just go to your terminal, and then you can, let me see, I had something before. So in here, I can just say Ollama run and the command that I had, right? And since I have the running version of Ollama here, and I know it's working fine because I see the icon, and then also then I can check here in details. If I just type in Ollama in my terminal, I'll see that there are many different options. So I can see which models I have listed or downloaded from before, if it's working fine or not, if I want to pull some information from before or not. For simplicity, what I did earlier is I just copied this command here, which is Llama 3.1, and that's the one that we're going to be using for this session. So I said Ollama run Llama 3.1. Now, if it's
Misbah,
not available,
can you zoom into that a little bit? Can you make your terminal a little bigger?
sure.
Oh, it made your terminal bigger, but not the text. The font size didn't change.
Yeah, that's
Will
true. Let me
Command plus
try.
do it?
Let me try.
There we go.
Uh,
There we go. All right. I don't know about all you, but I can read that now.
Awesome. Okay. So
There we
with
go.
this, yeah, appreciate it, David.
Yeah,
Because
sorry, sorry.
sometimes I just yeah, I tend to forget. So yeah, with this, if you don't have the model on your computer available, the first thing it's going to do is going to download the files needed for it to run, and then from there it will serve the model. So it's basically downloading and making that available. Also, in addition to that, is serving the model. So with this, I can actually ask question and start chatting with that, right? Um, I see there is a question about minimum hardware required to run. Again, it depends on the model. I would suggest to look for that. So something like Phi 3 from Microsoft, it's very small, and it probably is going to work on most of the hardware. So that is fun. Now, something like Llama 3.1, it depends, right? So the smaller version that we looked at, that was about 5 gig or so. And then in terms of the computation, you might want to check actually requirements for each of those. But yeah, I mean, there are different models, and there's probably going to be something that works on your hardware. So yeah, I mean, now we see that if we can start chatting with it, right? Not just that, you can serve the model, so you can call it like an API, right? So instead of calling OpenAI models, you can call it at a certain. So it's going to be the port that's available. So I'm going to talk about what port is that. Let me actually get out of this. So that's first step. You got Ollama, you ran one model, and then it's working fine as you start chatting. So that's all good. So now, second step, how do we run this? How do we build LLM applications, right? So that's where Langflow comes in. For all the folks who join in first time, Langflow is a tool that makes it easy by dragging and dropping different, let me just show you an example. different components here, different nodes or blocks, whatever you call it, and then you can run any model, be it anything hosted and calling as an API like OpenAI or Anthropic models or so, or something done locally, which we're going to do today. So the easiest way that I usually go installing or go by installing Langflow is if you go to the repo, and I would highly recommend for you to start the repo. You see a button at the bottom so that you can remember the repo, and then the first instruction you see here is Python pip install this. So these are two commands. Again, not don't want to go into any more programming than maybe just typing in these commands, right? Usually what I do is I just let me just go up here. So in here, I would, okay, let's go back. So in here, I can just make a directory of whatever it is. Okay, so for example, I'm gonna make a folder. You can make it through terminal, or you can make it outside in your Finder, or just any of the file browser. And in here, I'm gonna call it Langflow demo 2 in case I had one. Okay, and once you make it, you can go into Langflow demo 2, and here you just run this command. Or actually before that, many of you who have worked with Python or know about these virtual environments, what you can do is all of these installation, you can have it in one environment so it doesn't disrupt. So again, people who are not familiar with that, you can probably just get started with these two commands. Just copy paste this into terminal, and then copy paste the second one, Python and run Langflow run. And what's going to happen is you'll see a window like this, or a tab like this, that opens in your browser. And this is running locally for me. I can see it's on localhost, and it's running at that particular port. So that's, let's see, I'll take a pause here if any questions.
There was a question by Leonardo. Can I use it with a local machine, 12 gig RAM, and Windows the same as Linux? Did I see support for Windows on the Ollama site?
Yeah, there is actually. I believe you can. So, I mean, they do have for different operating systems. So for Windows, Linux, and for Mac
There
OS.
we go.
So that should work.
And
If
you can definitely run Langflow in Windows. Yeah, so that's.
Yeah, exactly, for both of them. But again, it's just going to differ about the model that you're using, right? So a smaller model, could work on certain machines, a bigger model on certain different machines. Okay.
Yeah,
Any other
that
questions?
and Support Latin made a comment that you can deploy Langflow via Railway. Yeah, you can go Railway, render, Hugging Face. There's all sorts of options. Again, there's a Docker-based option as well, so you can pretty much deploy it wherever you want from that standpoint. But let's see.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, and I do see that the chatting is a bit slow. Again, yeah, it depends on the computation available, right?
Yeah.
Even in my computer, I see that it's a bit slow. But there are certain models. I mean, like Phi 3 or so. Give it a try. I think that's going to be a little faster.
Well, and I think at
Okay,
the end of
so
the day, like the intent, like it's one thing to do it locally, to experiment with and test and develop and that kind of deal. But if you're going to use something like Ollama and you're going to deploy it with a real app, then you're going to also want to deploy it on real hardware, right?
that's true.
So whether you're doing that on your own on-prem hardware or you're deploying it to some cloud-based service, right? And in that case, you would then optimize for GPU or the types of processing it needs. So definitely recognize and Misbah, you and I were talking about this a little earlier today, that compared to some of the public services like OpenAI, GPT, and things like that, you might not get as fast response time on your local machine. But again, those public-facing models are not running on people's laptops, right? Anything like that. So again, there's definitely a distinction. Your hardware will matter for sure.
Exactly. And as I think that was a very good point, David, right? Just local testing. So you want to test with your local documents, you get started with this. But then as soon as you want to go to production or so, then again, you can run it on your own server. So you can have a GPU attached, but or you can have something spin up on Azure or AWS. So still, it's going to be private that you're running, and all of the data is within your secured environment. So you can do that. But again, once you get to production level, definitely you need a bit stronger hardware in that case. So once let's say you have both of these installed, Ollama and Langflow, there was, I think, a bit of an issue in the most recent version of Langflow as of yesterday. I know there is a fix that has been worked on, and it was also merged earlier this morning. I need to test that. But the version I'm using right now is the v1.0.10. This version, the Ollama works fine. In the newer version, there was an issue with just listing the model. Everything else works fine. It just does not list the document or the model, sorry. So just to test how things work, what I did is I went in, or maybe just a quick intro from beginning. This is the interface for people who just joined first time. You start a new project and you can start with a blank flow. Okay, and that's what I did. So I started with a blank flow. Let's do that again. Why not? And in here, I'm going to bring in, there's some sort of input that you need to provide. And in my case, I want to say this is going to be a chat input because I want to chat with the model. And there's also the text input option where you can use it to provide some text, or calling through an API or so, you can just provide some text in that case. The second thing is I want to have an input go to a model. So I'm going to search for Ollama. There are two results. One is the model itself. The other one is embedding. I'll try to actually zoom in this one as well. Let's see. Maybe hopefully that makes it a bit easier to read. So this one is the model. And in here, there are a couple of things happening. So first thing is the base URL. By default, Ollama has this port that it is serving at. So this is probably going to be default for most of the folks, unless if that was busy, then probably some other port is used. And in that case, you might want to modify this on your side. So whatever port is Ollama serving at, then you want to use that port. But by default, this is for most folks. And then what happens is Langflow automatically finds all of the models. Those are running on your computer. So in my case, I have 3 models that I ran earlier. I went through the steps shown before and did for Phi 3, Llama 3.1, and also these embeddings. So I'm going to select Llama 3.1 in this case. It is one of the latest one came out, and Ollama does a great job. They pretty much have same day support for most or for all of these new models that come out. So here, what I'm going to do is the message that I provide, the chat input, I want to send it to the model. And there is a block here that says input. So I'm just going to connect the chat input that goes to the model. And then now I want some sort of text out of that. So I'm going to bring in an output, which is a chat output. I want to chat. So the text from this model goes to the chat output. As simple as that. We brought in a block, have a chat input and output. So I'm just going to type in here just to check things are working fine. I'll say hi and then just run this. So as long as everything was done properly and all of the steps were followed properly, it should now send a request or a chat completion request to the Ollama serving locally on your computer, and based on that we get some response, and I can look at the response. It says here, how can I help you, right? So great. Now do see a question. I do not have input or output section in Langflow. Once you open a new project, then under components on your left side, most likely you'll see inputs and outputs section. Even if it's not in there, what I would suggest is if you were to just search chat input, then you'll probably see that component. I guess probably different version might have something else, but as far as I can recall, most of the recent versions have input and output in there, but you can still search for chat input. Okay, so now we know with this, we have a working flow, and this is Okay, let's see if there are any other question. Model name is Ollama in Windows. Okay, that's right. Actually, the one of the latest, so I think last two versions, .11 and 1.2. If you were to look at the version at the bottom left, it had some issue. It was not populating. So in that case, what you might have to do is you might have to open this block here and then specify yourself what model are you going to be using. It's I understand it's a little more than the usual interface, but that's been worked on. But if you were to install and run a .10, then it should work fine. And the way you can provide that info is in here. I missed it. There was a spot where you can actually say what's the model name. So in here, you can say the model name, whichever you have installed. So it's the second option from in the inputs. Okay, with that, now if I want, I can chat by using this playground, and we have seen this in some of the previous live streams. So I want to move on to next example, and this is very similar. What I've done is I just created a new project, and I wanted to chat with a document. I could have used one of these like document QA or RAG or so. So I chose this vector store RAG example, and in that example, there are a couple of things that I changed. So I'm going to open what I have right now. So this is the current setup. Let me see if I can open another tab with the default template. And then we can also look at the default template. So the default one is going to have OpenAI. So there are two sections. If you're looking at this first time, there is a running kind of component block or flow on top, which you can use to ask questions to document. And the one below is where you can actually provide document, and then it does the embeddings for you. It stores the embeddings, and it has that available for you, so you can then ask questions. So there are two aspects, right? So if you know about RAG, the first step is usually where you take document and chunk it and store it in a vector database. So in here, the default is that we're using OpenAI embeddings. We take a file, we split the text, and then we save it in a database. And in this case, it's Astra. This is by default. Now, what I did, instead of the OpenAI embeddings, I searched Ollama, and there's Ollama embeddings. I brought that block in, and you can see that it's, again, able to get the host. The model is not populated, self-populated is something actually, David, perhaps we need to inform the team. So what one needs to do is just type in the value that we had. Now,
that's a good point.
there are many different, sorry, go ahead, David.
No. I said that's a good point about the auto population. I think that's something that I will say something to the team right now as a potential feature to add in.
Awesome. Yeah, I think it populates the models, at least, I think that's been worked on in the latest version. So we need to also populate for the embedding. But then again, for just kind of, you can type in those models. And what you can do is I'm going to search embeddings, and then you'll see a bunch of different embedding models, right? And what these are going to do, so I'm using Nomic embed text. Again, there's a lot of resources available out there about these embeddings and how the RAG system works. And we've talked about the whole setup in previous videos as well, so not gonna go in details on that one, but feel free to watch one of their videos on that one. So basically, we want to take the text we have, convert it into vectors or numbers, and that is going to be done with these embedding models. So what I did is I took that model, so I took Nomic embed text, and I used this command here, copied it, ran it in the terminal as we saw earlier. And once you have that, what you'll notice is it will be available for you in the with Ollama. So I'm going to search here or say Ollama list, and I can see that that model is available for me. Okay, great. Now, once the model is available, what I can do is go back to Langflow, and here I can just type in the nomic embed text, right, as is. So the way it was, it's still not auto-populated, so we just have to type in. And then I replaced or swapped the AstraDB with ChromaDB. ChromaDB is a local database which runs completely local, so all of your data, again, stays local, and you can find it under vector stores. There are a few different options. There's also FIS, which runs locally. There is Quadrant, also have local version, and ChromaDB is the one that we use that is it runs entirely locally. So you just have to drag and drop the block and then give some collection name as what you're saving. So I basically uploaded a Llama 3.1 paper in there. So I said, you know what, I want to call this collection name as Llama 3.1. And then the persistent directory, I gave it some name. And what's going to happen is the first time you run all of this, actually, just, maybe let's do another collection here. I'm going to call this Llama 3.1 test. Okay. And this is ChromaDB. It's already persistent. So I'm just going to run this. What's going to happen is it's going to go through the steps of taking the file that I provided and then splitting it and then using the embeddings and then saving it in ChromaDB with that persistent directory. And the persistent directory, I can see it actually if I have the, just a file explorer open on the side. In the Langflow instance where I'm running it, I have it as ChromaDB, and it's saving the embeddings right here in these files. So once everything runs, then I just saw that, the second run, I gave it a different name. So that name is another collection over here. So now we have two different, the old one and the new one. So with that, we know everything ran fine with the embeddings portion. And now that should be available for us to use in our next flow. And this kind of looks a bit complicated, but at the core of it, it is just asking the vector database. So there's the document ingestion that we just did. We took the document, converted it into embeddings. At this portion here, we're going to take the question from the user, whatever question it is, and then also embed that, then compare it in the same vector space, whichever are the most similar results that we get. So we could take 4, 10, or whatever are the similar vectors we get from it. We'll provide that to the model. In our case, it's a local model, right, that we're going to be asking it to generate a response based on that. So that's kind of what's happening as an overview. And if we look at our template, same thing. We take the user input, we provide it to the same vector store using the embeddings, so Ollama embeddings in this case, and then we search for the vectors. And once we search with that query, we get certain results. Now, these results, we want to parse the text out of it. So actually, let me run. I'm going to ask, since we had 3.1 test, let's do that. And I'm asking, what is this document? And the model looks fine. I'll just run at least till this point, right? So we have all 3 of these components running at this stage. Now, once we run it, we see that we get some results. And in here, I can see the output. So there are 10 results that I got from here. And each of those, I can see what text was taken from the original document, okay? And this is going to be different chunks. This is based on the question I asked. It was a very broad question, what is this document? If I were to ask something specific, maybe what training data was used in Llama 3.1, or what sort of model architecture is there, it would probably give a narrowed result. So maybe let's do that. What training was used? I'm going to search again. It's pretty fast. You see, vector search in general is quite fast. So now I can see all of these results. So we're asking for 10 data points in this case. So we're getting 10 of those results. Now, once we have the results available, what I want to do is I want to provide it to a model with some context, okay? And usually what you'll see, the base version of any RAG template is that you have these contexts, these maybe whatever 10 results that we got. We say, given the context that was provided, answer as best as possible. Okay, so it tries saying that, okay, just don't go outside of these, because these models are trained on a bunch of data. They might just go outside and try to answer on their own. So this is one way of controlling. There are many different techniques, of course, that one could apply. This is the base version of it. And then the question itself, right? The question we provided from here, what training data was used, and then we get context from the Chroma DB. And with that, now we send this as a prompt. So what I can do is, since I ran this before, I can just freeze. So this is one of the new features in Langflow. I can freeze the data or the run results from before. Now I want to run up to this point. I want to see what the prompt is. So I'm going to run here, and it's going to take the last 2 blocks and gather all the info together. Then I can see what is my prompt. So here's the prompt. Like, it's taken all the results as context from before. So there is a bunch of context in there. And then it's saying, given the context above, answer the question as best as possible. And so what training data was used, right? So this is the final prompt that I'm sending to the next block. Okay, once we have all of that together, now we want to send that to a completion model. In this case, again, we want to use Ollama for local inference. So I'm using, again, the same model. I could have changed this, and then one could always go with a different model or so, but just to keep things simple, we'll use the same model, and I'll just run rest. So I have all of the info till here. I can freeze it and then run these 2 blocks, or we can run the whole thing again, not an issue. So let's just run this. Again, the configuration over here seems pretty much same. I just copied and pasted the block from earlier that we saw. So it's the same port, same model, same setting with temperature, and then we're connecting to input, and then the text goes as output. And once this runs, we have a green check mark that says, things were fine. And then at the end, I can see the message as what was the... Okay, so this is a summarized version of what we mainly use human-generated data collected from our data vendors. Okay, I guess it just summarized, from all of that context. If we were to ask specifically what data sets or list the data sets, then we'll probably get details of all the data sets used to train. So again, this gets you started. One could always, change the prompt use. One could change the structure. There are advanced RAG templates also on the store. There are also different papers that one could see as how advanced techniques could be implemented. But again, if you have some basic document, you want to ask them some question, get started quickly, this will get you started quickly in a few minutes. Okay, I'll pause there for a little bit. David, any questions?
Yes, all sorts of questions. Hold on real quick. I was responding to one here. All right, let's go ahead and try to tackle a couple of these, actually. Let's see. All right, this one came up a bunch, so I'm going to go ahead and just pop this one up on the screen. Can I write a custom Python class function in Langflow? Yes, you absolutely can do that. As a matter of fact, Misbah was showing earlier the code. So Misbah, would you mind just picking in a component? And then if you hover over, if you click on one of these components, you'll see a little dialog pops up. You go to the code, and that'll bring you to the code. Now, you can modify this code inline if you want, right? And then you can actually save it as a new component. So you can modify. These are just Python. These are wholly contained Python modules, right? So, and matter of fact, most of the code that Misbah is showing right now is really just setting up the parameters for the component itself, right? Like the core meat of it is usually down here exactly in the build section where you're doing something. You can see this one is the one that's interacting with Chroma, right? But yeah, the answer is yes. You can absolutely write a custom Python class or function in Langflow. You can actually, it's a cool feature that you can then, once you do that, you can save it as a custom component, and it'll show up in your your saved components, and then you can use them with any flows. You can share them with the community, all sorts of things. So hopefully, Piotr, that answers that from that one. Let's see. Where is it? Yeah, this actually kind of goes to. This actually kind of goes to this one as well. If I get this right, Langflow is a sort of GUI to design GenAI workflows. It's great how to see the outcome in the browser, but you showed earlier the underlying code is Is there, where'd it go? It keeps, the Q&A questions keep moving around on me. Is there a possibility to insert the GUI design code into real code? So this is like a slight variation of the question from before. It's not about writing custom components. It's really about the API, right? So, so to answer your question here, one, you can actually take the code right out of a custom component and implement that in your own code if you really wanted. But I think the real power is where Misbah's hovering right now. So Misbah, if you wouldn't mind opening that up. So I'm going to clear this out so we can see the screen. So there's a basic HTTP URL, an endpoint that you can hit as an API, as you see there in the curl command. You can actually implement this directly in Python or JavaScript. But the one that I think is getting to the crux of the question here. I'm trying to find who asked that, is the Python code run. So you can actually take any flow and you can export the flow as a JSON blob. And then you can import that JSON blob into your code. And then all of the logic of your Langflow flow will be in your code, right? So you can treat both Langflow as an API server, and you can do things kind of like a development or at runtime and make modifications. But if you've got a flow that's pretty much like stable, and you're like, yes, I want to put this in my code, you can just download that JSON blob. You know, you can argue whether or not, I know we've talked about with the Langflow team, we've talked about like, can I just export all of the code and do that? Right, that's definitely a discussion there. I would say the JSON blob is pretty much the closest thing to that. Okay, let's see.
Just to maybe add a little bit to that, David, is
please.
I think there was a question about exporting. So if you were to go under settings, you'll see this option to export. And once you export, it's going to export as a JSON. Okay. And once you have that, of course, then you can go to this, take this code. It has all the parameters. Let's say, for example, you want to tweak a certain thing in your Python app. So maybe the chat input is something I would like to make changes. You can go in here, look at the chat input. I can maybe change, yeah, I mean, if I want to call this whatever 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 as the session, and then if I were to go back, I'll see that this is the tweak that I need to change. So it even helps you out as what parameter do you need to change. And all of these are parameters that you can change.
Right. And so hopefully that, I think the question came from Yvonne, is how to export the Langflow to pure Python app. So that's that. There's multiple options there, but if you really want to export it, it's what Misbah just showed you, is exporting that JSON blob, and then you can import it with that Python code tab. All right, let's see. We have all sorts of other questions. I did see the one here from Peter. What is the best hardware, let's say below 10K, to do local training and inference for development? Interestingly enough, we actually had Volodymyr who answered that for us, right? So thank you for doing so on that case, because he had a really great answer. To run local models, probably the most efficient solution is to use MacBooks with sufficient RAM, like 96 gigs, 128 gigs. I think the most simple and cost-effective or efficient to have about 100 gigs of video memory. But that video memory is the key part, right? Like some of the models will run okay on regular CPUs, but the real, you get the real power from the GPUs right now.
That's right.
Yeah, that's for sure. Let's see. Now, there were some questions about some things that are upcoming. There was one question about GraphRag. That was from Volodymyr as well. So an interesting update from Aster GraphRag. Do you plan to create dedicated Langflow components? There was also another question asking about something similar about unstructured.io, because we have partnered with them, DataStax. And unstructured.io is super cool because it allows you to take hence unstructured documents like, say, websites or PDFs and things like that, and actually pull out really the meat and the meaningful parts of them in a structured format that is much easier for the LLMs to understand and to store in databases and that kind of deal. That one as well is right here. Here we go. Oh, also, yeah, also from Volodymyr. So both on the GraphRag standpoint and the unstructured.io standpoint, there are things coming. You know, unstructured.io is definitely on the roadmap as far as adding support for components and that kind of deal. I don't really have like dates or anything I can give anybody, but yes, these things are definitely on the roadmap and they're coming. Now, Everton asked a question that I'm not, maybe you'll know this one, Misbah. I'm not entirely sure. I think it's actually on the custom component end. And the question was, is it possible to get my LangGraph code and convert it to Langflow for the visual representation? And my take on that was, well, if you do have something from the LangGraph side, you could always create a custom component. I don't know though. Like, if you had experience with that one, Misbah, from LangGraph?
From my knowledge, I don't think that's possible yet. There is discussion on how to make that available, but yeah, my understanding is not yet, David.
Okay. Now, funny enough, when Everton, when you first asked that, my mind went right to Langsmith, which is obviously not LangGraph. Yes, there is in fact an integration with Langsmith. So if you want to, I know this is not quite what you asked, but I'm going to answer with this one. If you wanted to be able, from an operational standpoint, somebody was asking about a production, like how can you look at this in production, or can you deploy this to production, that kind of deal. Matter of fact, that does get into that question. I'll find it here real quick. Where'd it go? Oh, actually, I don't see that question anymore for some reason in QA, but there was a question about being able to run this in production, like if you were to deploy this. So if you're not familiar with Langsmith, it is a way that you can operationalize or use it to view the Langflow in production, right? So you can actually, like what Misbah is showing you with all the individual components in a flow and how you can inspect the results and everything. That works when you're like testing things and you're kind of running through a singular flow. But if you've got thousands of operations going, or something like that, that's not going to work very well for that. So Langsmith allows you to inspect your flows operationally at runtime. And what's super cool about it is, are you bringing it up?
Actually, I was gonna pull up the docs. Go ahead, David.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I was like, oh, well, I think Misbah's going to bring it up. So what it allows you to do is you can just get an API key from Langsmith that is free. And then all you have to do is set an environment variable, apply that API key, and then Langflow will automatically integrate with it. Let's see.
So yeah, just wanted to bring this up, David. So Langsmith, just step-by-step, configuration that's available on docs. So if you were to go to docs.langflow.org or just Langflow website and go to docs, you'll see a section in integration where you can follow along. We did our best to capture all the necessary steps, and from there you should be able to see the results. And also, maybe to add to that question, many folks they want to learn, right? So right now we're doing on local in a machine how we're running Langflow, but how do we deploy that? There are many different options to deploy Langflow as is if you'd like to do that. Something we covered previously is Railway Render. It's very easy. You can just click this link here, and once you click, it takes you to render, and it pulls up the default configuration. You just have to just give your name and the select a branch, and then it should have your instance running. Now, once you do that, the good thing is your APIs, you can call them from anywhere. Basically, it builds this API instead of the local machine. You're going to see your render or railway based web address, and then you can call these APIs from anywhere. So that's one way of running in production, and that can scale quite a lot depending on what machine you select on these platforms. That can scale.
Yeah.
And then again, if you have access to GCP or so, then that could even scale further if you like, which is cost efficient as well.
Yeah. One thing I'd like to point out about, running this stuff in production and scalability and everything, this may eventually change, but like right now, with the inclusion of LLMs in our workflows, it changes the game a little bit, because like before Gen AI and stuff like that, went all mainstream and everything, most of the time when we were talking about, applications and like our databases and things like that, at least from our standpoint, we're usually talking in the order of like thousands or millions of operations a second or something like that. But now you have the inclusion of LLMs that are doing more intelligent reasoning and things like that. As you noticed, even separate from Ollama, right? Even for some of the fastest, GPT-4o mini, or, Grok and Gemma or whatever like that, like they're going to be in the order of hundreds of milliseconds to like a second or so to respond. So that immediately changes the throughput, the expectation of throughput that we had before. So there are ways that you can try to optimize things, right? And you can try to make parts of it fast, but you're always going to have to contend with the speed of the model. Now, what is super cool though is that more and more, I think Microsoft just released some models like this. More and more, we're seeing that you can actually build smaller models that have like all the reasoning capabilities as like these big, huge LLMs, but they just don't have all of the knowledge, meaning that they're smaller to run. They, take up a lot, smaller footprint and everything like that. You essentially supply them with your data, like in a RAG pipeline, what Misbah was showing. So there's more and more of these that are coming out that are more performant. But I think for a while, the LLMs are going to be the bottleneck, right? So when we're talking about like running at the same throughput we're used to, I think we have to change our expectations a little bit. But then there's a trade-off. Our applications are now able to do things more intelligently than they could before. So we'll see, how that pans out. Eventually I wonder if we'll get to a point where we'll be back to the same throughput. Now there was a question. Oh, sorry, Ms. But did you have something you wanted to say about that?
No, just want to mention there are some providers which make it a bit faster, right? So something like Grok.
Yes.
We had, one of the guests in one of the webinars, talking through, what models are available in Grok and how we can integrate it within Langflow. So go check that video out, please, if you're looking at faster models, faster inference. But again, it's something hosted by them. It'll be a bit difficult to get same speeds locally.
Yeah. And there are, I will have to give a call out to like Amazon Bedrock, right? There are services if you're in the Amazon ecosystem, right, and you want to play that particular game, you can get pretty fast access to some of these models, right? So again, it depends. There is some little research you need to do from that standpoint. Now I do see this question here from Ulf. The obvious question: coding along is nice, reading along at once, own pace better. Will there be a link to GitHub repository with the boilerplate code later? So that star the Langflow repo link down there is actually just a link to the GitHub repository for Langflow. What Misbah did earlier when he installed Langflow, Langflow itself comes with a set of boilerplate templates. I think I see Misbah's reading my mind exactly. And, and you'll see, and if you scroll down, actually, you have the new agent ones, don't you? Yes, you do. Right. So these templates, I believe the vector store RAG one you use is probably that one. I don't know if you used any of the agent ones here in the Crew AI stuff you showed. But those templates are like the boilerplate, if you will. The only difference is that when you use one of these templates, it may have a default model for you, but if you want to switch it out for Ollama or something, then you just replace that, right? You just swap that out. So hopefully that answers the question for you, Ulf. I guess, I know in previous streams, Misbah, people have asked you to upload your flows. Maybe this is another one of those cases. I'm going to totally put you on the spot.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, happy to upload that. So this is just a modified version of the basic RAG template, so we can upload that, not an issue. With that, actually, also wanted to real quick talk about the sequential agent, David, if that's fine, maybe 5 minutes or so.
Yeah, let's get into it.
So this is using template shown earlier. So what I did is the sequential task agent. I just used that template to build something here with Ollama. So instead of the usual block of having OpenAI, I think if you were to start with that, there'll be OpenAI block in there. I used Ollama in for all of the LLM usage, and in here I also kind of broke down the flow just for easier understanding. And what's happening is at the core of it, we're using Crew AI. Crew AI makes it easy for us to build these agent crews. So you might have a task which has multiple steps in it, or you might want to have a manager and some workers working together as a crew of agents solving certain tasks. So this is something very similar. So in here, we can give an input, say, agent 1, you do this. Agent 2, you do this from the input from agent 1. And then same way, agent 3 gets the input from agent 2. And then at the end, we have an output. So the template that you'll probably get if you were to go with the sequential one, it looks something similar here. We have agent 1, which has a task, okay, as we saw in this image here, or in this diagram. The only thing is it has a tool available to it, which it can use to search internet. And usually the way you start building these agents is you give them a role where you say, okay, you are a researcher. Your task is to search information, or just Google in this case. And then the backstory is you are helpful, or you do good research, or whatever you want to give as a backstory to it. And then based on that role, and based on the task that is at hand that we assign to them. And the task over here for the first agent, we're saying that you are supposed to take the information, and the outcome should be as bullet points and small phrases about this topic. Okay. And the topic or the description of the task over here is take the topic from the user and build a document, or just anything that is a written content that we're going to do. So that's the task for this whole setup. It looks a lot, but there's just an agent with a task, and this is the task that we want in a certain expected output. And then we define the description of the task. We give the topic to this prompt here, and the prompt together with the topic goes to the task. So at the end, you could just, if one could, just break this and just write description, then all of that is taken care of. The key things is, if you have a tool that you want the agent to use, then you assign a tool, and there's a whole section for tools at the bottom that you can use tools from. And then you have to assign a language model, which in this case is going to be Ollama. So same thing, I just basically took the whole thing, or in the template, the way it's set up is you have another agent which takes the task from the first agent, and then it runs it. And in this case, we're saying this agent is an editor. It's going to edit the info, modify it, and the expected output in our case is that we want it to be, again, small paragraphs and bullet points with corrected content. And then we are saying the topic was, agile. In this case, we can choose another topic, but just simplicity, I think we'll just run it this way. And then it takes all of that. And the third agent is a comedian, and it takes the content, it writes things in a funny way. So it's going to write a blog or so, but it's just going to write in a funny way. Again, there is an expected output from here. So all of these are repetitive, as you noticed. So these 4 or 5 blogs, those 4 or 5 blogs, and all of these 4 or 5 blogs, except for the tools. That's one thing we added to the first agent. You can assign tools to any of these agents. Those are optional. And once you have all of that together, then you say, this is a sequential crew. There's a block for that. And then bring all of the information together in one room, in one place, and then run it. So my input was agile. This was the topic. I can just run this whole flow. And then what's going to happen is, at each stage, we can see which one is completed. That is completed right now. We get all of these green check mark. Each agent is doing their task. They bring the info together to this room over here where all of the info is going to be combined. And once we have the combined information, then that is provided to the user. Now, since, again, this is running locally, by hardware is not as strong to run multiple of these calls. So it's going to take a few seconds, but at the end, you'll get some information out. So this is a sequential template, right? There's also hierarchical, or there's I think there's a complex one which talks about just dynamically giving prompts to these agents, so you don't have to describe anything. All of that is dynamically done by LLM. So you just assign a role to each agent, or not even that. You just say this is the task. It builds this agent workflow with task and role and the backstory and all of that. So yeah, while it takes a few seconds, I'll probably bring that up on the screen once it's done. David, any other questions that we need to answer?
I was just going through them. I think we already answered. I answered in the chat regarding the partner certification on like LangChain Flow. I don't believe that there's a certification that I know of yet on that end.
Yeah.
Unless you know of anything different. I haven't heard anything like that myself. There is a question. Again, this is from Everton again, not particularly on this flow, Misbah, but it looks like, and Everton, I'll look into the chat, correct me if I'm wrong, but he's saying, so we are able to create reflection, react, and all we can do with LangGraph using only Langflow. And if, I guess I'm not, I may not be understanding your question completely. Can I and if you're talking about React as in like React front end JavaScript framework kind of thing, and such like that, you can absolutely wrap a React app with the API around Langflow flow, right? So you can have your GenAI logic, your workflow logic in Langflow, and then reference that in React. As a matter of fact, you can even go one step further, which is something super cool, with generative UI and use tool calling and stuff like that. I think we kind of briefly mentioned that in the beginning, to actually generate React UI on the fly without even having to write the code. That's a whole different topic that maybe we should do a live stream on, maybe,
Yeah,
Misbah,
I think that would be
on that one. But
useful.
I'm
Yeah.
not sure. I'm not 100% sure, Everton, if that's what you're referring to.
Yeah, but in this case, from what I understood, these are the React way of so reasoning and act. I think there is also a comment reflect and act. So it's a type of agent, I believe, David. That's what
Oh,
the question is
okay. So
towards.
I'm totally
Yeah.
off. Okay, I'm off in left field.
But
Okay.
both are possible, right? So let's say in this case for these React agents, you could certainly do that. It's a certain prompt that you can utilize. You can just bring in any of the agent blocks and components, and then build that. So that's completely fine. You can build all of that in here as well. Now, if the question is, can we export as a land graph file? So you can export this whole flow and then run it in any Python code that you have, and then call it from your LangGraph tool if you'd like to do that. A direct export as a LangGraph agent file is not yet available. That's again also in discussion. But right now, what you could do is take parts of the flow, or the whole flow, and then export it and run it outside. But yeah, certainly you can build these different types of agent frameworks available.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, I think maybe one of these sessions in future we can talk about how what are the available agent techniques, and then also build them. I think that would be really cool.
I'm glad you had that one, Misbah, for Everton's question, because my mind, I saw React in my mind, and now I see the case is different from actual, like, the React framework. In my mind, went totally off. So I'm glad you had that one. All right, let's see. We can just say we're done answering that one. Now, Misbah, there are more questions in the QA. Do you have another flow, though, you want to go through, or should we keep on these questions?
No, I think that was it. Yeah.
Okay. All right, let's see. How to use Langflow with an existing Django project. Yeah, you can use Langflow with any Python, honestly. So like what Misbah is showing, and that is from Joseph, and I'll pop that up. Yeah, so it doesn't matter the framework, honestly. You could be using Flask or Django or whatever. It's not the implementation on the code end. It is that API. Right. So whether you want to use Misbah, if you wouldn't mind going to the Python API, whether you want to go to the API and you want to take and generate the Python API code where you just interact with it directly, like you're seeing here, that the framework doesn't matter, right? Or if you want, like Liz was just showing a second ago, if you want to export that JSON blob, either one of these would be valid, regardless of the Python framework. So it's more, are you using Python? Are you using JavaScript? Or if you're using some other language that isn't natively supported, you can just use the API endpoint, right? You can go about it that way as well. So hopefully that answers your question there, Joseph. And let's see. I think, yeah, Mohammed, as far as vo.deb, I'm not entirely sure from the Vercel AI SDK. And that might just be a reference I'm missing from the generative UI standpoint, but it does sound like we might be talking about the same thing. But yeah, I am talking about the tool calling from Vercel AI SDK. And it's honestly, it's super capable. It's really cool because it allows you to almost like call like mini prompts within your code that then it goes and finds the tool that can do something. We actually have another app that we built called Movies Plus Plus that's kind of like a Netflix clone in a way. And what's super cool about it is, for the code that's in there, any of the stuff you see being rendered on the screen we're not actually rendering it. It is all coming from tool calling, and it's pretty super awesome. So with that, I think I did see one other question here, because I know we're at time, so I want to be respectful of that. I did see a question about wanting, do we have any resources or courses to share for folks who are looking to get into this space? Like, Misbah, do you happen to have anything off the top of your head? I guess maybe we should prepare that in the future.
Yeah. So right now we're building this series. If you were to subscribe to Langflow YouTube channel, you'll see there. We're updating that every day or so. So we're adding a whole series how you can get started with the first flow and then kind of building complex one. In addition to that, there are a few different playlists on YouTube that I've seen that they show how you can go with different parts of Langflow. But yeah, perhaps in a few days you'll actually see it on our YouTube channel. I can't think of any course right now, David, that talks about. I mean, I've had a few courses before which talks in general about LangChain and how to use Langflow
Right.
from that perspective. So that is also something, but don't want to self promote here in
I
this
I
case.
do believe that there are some courses out on like Free Code Camp and such like that. I don't have them handy right now, but I think that's a really good idea. Maybe that's something that in the future we can have that kind of stuff handy. Um, all right. So with that, let's see. I think we're at time, and we've gotten through the vast majority of the questions here. And I would say, uh, thank you everybody for joining us today and for wonderful interaction. Like I absolutely totally enjoyed today, and the questions that came through. And we will see you all next week.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, David. Really appreciate it.
All right, take care, everybody. Thank you.